Aloha, and welcome to the University of Hawaii West Oahu's Research and Writing Series. This 4-part series is a partnership between the library and the No'eau Center. My name is Karina, and I'm a public services librarian, serving primarily the social sciences and education divisions. Elsewhere in this series, you will meet Robin, who is the director of the No'eau Center, which is the learning center at UH West Oahu. We're excited for you to be part of this workshop series. We've partnered together to help empower you through the research and writing process. The videos in this series are accompanied by quizzes. If you're completing any of the episodes for credit in a course, please complete the quiz questions after you watch the video or as we direct you to certain questions throughout the video. Here, you can see how we've broken down the research and writing process. The second episode in this series focuses on the nitty-gritty of the research process. In this episode, we'll be talking about the different sources you'll encounter when conducting research, some searching tips and tricks that will help when you're ready to start finding information, and we'll dive into 2 of the library's databases to get you comfortable with using library resources. We'll then examine ways to evaluate websites to make sure the information is credible and reliable. Finally, we'll conclude with tips on how to take notes to maximize your time and efforts. I want to preface this episode by letting you know that research is a process and it can be a challenging one. When you're conducting research, you may at times feel like you're drowning in information. Our hope is that this workshop will make the research process less intimidating and better equip you to utilize useful search strategies and the tools that are built into the library's databases. Knowing how to conduct research and critically examine the information you come across is an important life skill, and one that you'll need to continue to develop as both a student and a human. When tackling a research project, keep in mind that there are different stages you'll be going through. Once you've identified a topic, you'll then have to search for resources, read them, evaluate them to determine what it is they're saying, and then eventually, when you've compiled a useful collection of research, examine it as a whole to see what it says about your research topic. At this point, you may find that your research doesn't meet your needs, so you may need to start all over again. That's okay, but it's very important to keep all these different stages in mind so that you ensure you have allotted enough time to move on to the next step, which is synthesizing your research and writing the actual paper. So let's talk about information. We live in a very information-rich world. If you think about it, you can access millions of records, social media posts, or articles with the push of a button. Because of that, it's important to know how to use information to your advantage. Now, what we're going to quickly explore right now is the information lifecycle. So we'll be looking at how information is produced, where it comes from, and how it changes over time. This is our interpretation of the information lifecycle. Starting from the left, when information is available immediately after an event occurs, to the far right, which shows the type of information available on that topic after several years. It's important to keep this life cycle in mind when doing research, as it helps you to determine what type of research materials will be available to you. So the first stage is immediately after the event occurs. You'll likely only be able to find basic coverage about the occurrence from social media and news outlets. The authors are everyday people like me and you, as well as journalists and bloggers. The information is not as detailed as it will get further on in the life cycle. After a few weeks, popular magazines will begin to discuss the event's impact on society and culture. The authors are journalists, and commentary is provided by scholars and experts in the field. After several months, you might start to see really focused, more detailed analysis in scholarly journals. The authors are scholars researching the event's impact, and the articles are intended for other scholars in that particular field. And then at the end of the information lifecycle, after 1 or more years, you'll start to see books on the topic. The books will contain really in-depth scholarly analysis and coverage by authors, experts, or journalists. So I hope this illustrates to you how long it takes to produce information on a topic or event, and showcases how much time and analysis go into the creation of journal articles and books. In this next section, we'll be further examining the types of sources you're likely to come across during your research. We'll start with books and articles, and we'll discuss websites later on in this presentation. As we discussed earlier, books are great if you want a really comprehensive, in-depth analysis of a topic. You'll want to keep in mind, though, that because it takes a few years for books to get published, it may not contain the most recent or up-to-date information on the topic. Also, books tend to be on the longer side, which means you'll need to set aside time to read them. That being said, books will usually have table of contents, so if you review that first, you might be able to pinpoint certain chapters that you can then focus your attention on. You'll want to consider all of these things when conducting research, and you certainly should not discount the value of books to you as a student. With scholarly articles, they're shorter than books and highlight original research, and you can likely find more recent information on a topic. A lot of professors will require students to utilize peer-reviewed articles. To briefly explain, the peer review process means that before a scholar can publish an article, other scholars in that field review the article to make sure it is accurate, contains original research, and that it makes a valuable contribution to the field. You'll want to keep in mind, though, that scholarly articles can contain jargon, which can make them a little more difficult to read. This next section will highlight a few tips that will help when you're ready to start searching. So without further ado, let's dive into that first tip. The first thing that you want to do when you have a research question or a research topic is to identify your keywords. You can think of these as your main concepts. In this example, my research question is, how will artificial intelligence impact musicians and artists? Looking at that question, I know that my main concepts are artificial intelligence and musicians or artists. The next thing that I want to do is identify synonyms for each of those main keywords. And the reason that I want to do that is because we all describe things differently. By thinking of words that could also be used or specific examples that might be relevant, you cast a wider net when searching, which helps you find as many relevant results as possible. For example, synonyms for artificial intelligence might be AI-generated content or actual AI programs that exist, like ChatGPT or AudioCraft. Other ways of exploring the effects on musicians might be to look at a specific industry, like K-pop, or examples of virtual AI artists like Maeve and Eternity. Now, again, the reason that we want to do this is because if we start searching and run into a dead end, we can try substituting some of these other related concepts and keywords into our search as another way to find results. The next tip I have for you is to search for phrases. To search for phrases, you'll want to use quotation marks around 2 or more words to lock the word order in place. You're essentially searching for a phrase instead of individual words that may be located in different areas of a record. You can see examples here of how that works when using the library's databases versus a search engine like Google. Note the number of results for each. Now you'll want to keep your phrases short, but you can always search for the presence of multiple phrases within the same resource. Though reducing the number of results, you know that they should be more relevant to your needs as your phrase exists somewhere in the records that have been retrieved, whether that's in the abstract, the title of the article or journal, or in the resource itself. The next tip I have for you is to use truncation. Truncation is when you use an asterisk at the end of a root word to search for variant word endings. So if I were to truncate music by adding the asterisk to the end of the root, what I'm telling the database when I do that is to search for music, it's plural, musics, musical, musician, musicianship, and so on. I'm essentially telling the database to try to finish that word for me. And the beauty of it is that I don't have to type out all those variant word endings. I just add the asterisk, and the database does the work for me. Now, the last tip I have for you is to use your Boolean operators. Boolean operators are what you use to connect your keywords in what you can think of as your search string. That's what you type into the search bar. Boolean operators are powerful, so it's important to know how to use them properly. The first Boolean operator is AND. What you tell the database when you connect your first word and your second word with AND is that both of the terms must be present in the results that it retrieves for you. In most databases, AND is implied by default. When you use AND, you'll get fewer results, but you'll notice that they're much more relevant. The second Boolean operator is OR. What you're telling the database when you connect two keywords with OR is that either the first word or the second word or both of them must be present in the results that it retrieves for you. So it actually broadens your search. Now, thinking back to our keywords and our synonyms, I want to connect my main concepts, my keywords, with AND, and any synonyms or related concepts with OR. Examine the examples in the bubbles, and this next slide should illustrate that a little more for you. So going back to our original research question, how will artificial intelligence impact musicians and artists? You'll notice that each of my main concepts are on its own line and connected to each other with AND. If I decide that I want to use a synonym or a related concept, I'm going to connect it to its family using OR. So I'm using AND to connect my key concepts and OR to connect any synonyms. And just to make the order of operations clear, if you do add in synonyms, group them together with its family, its relatives, inside of parentheses. So let's say that you're ready to start searching for research and resources. Now, the term database may sound intimidating, but do not let that deter you. You can basically think of a database as a collection of information that is highly organized and that can be searched via various fields, whether it be the author field, the title field, publication date, etc. Beyond that, you know that when you're using a library's database, you usually have the option to search specifically for peer-reviewed resources. By using those features, it's more likely that your results will be reliable and factual. The library provides you with access to a multitude of databases that vary in size, focus area, and so on. You have 24/7 access to these databases and the materials housed within. And most of our databases offer special features, which include but are not limited to citation generators, easy share options, and free account storage. Now we're about to explore two of the library's databases, OneSearch and Academic Search Complete, the latter of which is hosted by the EBSCOhost platform. While I'm guiding you through these two platforms, notice that although they may look very different and access different types of materials, there are still some similarities. I hope you'll find this next section really useful and that it'll give you a better idea of each database's functionality and some of the special features that you should be using. So this is the library's website. The main search bar connects you with OneSearch, a discovery tool that searches through the library's print holdings and most of its databases. Using the search bar, you'll receive information about available resources, ranging from scholarly articles to books to ebooks to streaming videos to journals. So overall, it's a really comprehensive search. You'll want to play with your keywords and overall search strategy. Utilize those tools and techniques that were showcased earlier in this presentation. Note how the amount of results changes and the varying relevancy of the top results depending on my search terms. Now, every database you use will have filter options, so be sure to look for and use these tools. You use filters all the time when shopping online, whether you're filtering by category or color or size. You can think of it as the same thing in the library's databases, but for scholarly resources. In OneSearch, my filter options are on the left-hand side of the page. Here, I can limit by resource type. You can think of that as material type, whether that be book or video or article. Now let's say I wanted to look at books on the topic. If I click on books, it removes all other resource types from the results list. if I want to remove a filter I added, I can see that it created an active filter section at the top of the sidebar, so I can click on the X next to books to remove that filter. Now let's say that I wanted to view peer-reviewed articles. I would click on peer-reviewed journals, then articles under the resource type category. So there are quite a few peer-reviewed articles on my topic if I were using this specific search string. In perusing the results, let's say I like the first one. You can click on the ellipsis to see some tools. And if you click on the item, it'll expand the full item record, which includes links to the full text and the full abstract for you to consult. To read the actual article, I'd find the link under the View Online section of its item record. So that is OneSearch in a nutshell. I hope you feel comfortable with its functionality now, especially since it operates as the library's main search bar. Let's shift gears and take some time now to explore the second resource, Academic Search Complete. Since I'm searching for a database, I would open the A to Z list of library databases. It's alphabetically ordered, and Academic Search Complete is near the top of this list. So here we are. I can see by looking above the first search bar that I'm currently searching in Academic Search Complete. If I click on Choose Databases, I can expand my search to other relevant EBSCO collections. I'll select a few other collections based on my topic, including some of the business and legal databases. Now, if I go back to that same area, I can see that I'm searching in multiple EBSCO collections, the ones I had expanded my search to. In the first search bar, I can type in one of my main keywords. I'll add my second main concept to the second search bar. Note that each search bar is connected to the other using the Boolean operator AND. One great thing about EBSCO is that it tries to complete your thought for you based on what you are typing into the search bar. So if you add in OR after a keyword, it should offer suggestions for synonyms if any are obvious. After I execute the search, I'll want to find the sidebar on the left of the page to filter my results. Here, I'll be sure to limit to full text and peer-reviewed articles. If you want to limit by publication year, you can enter that information there. There are other filtering options available, some of which you may find useful, so explore those while you're doing your research. Now let's say that I don't like clicking back and forth on an article to see if it would be a good fit. If you click on Page Options above the first result, then change the result format to detailed, the article's abstract will be added to the list of results. So you'll be able to determine if the article is a good fit immediately. Let's say I like this article. If I click on it, numerous tools will appear on the right side of the page. Here, if I have a free EBSCO account, I can add it to a folder. Or I can copy and paste the article citation into my reference list. Or I can email the article to myself. If I choose to use the email tool, I will receive in my inbox the link to bring me back to this record, the PDF if it is shown as available, and the citation style I choose. This is one of my favorite features of EBSCO because it delivers everything neatly packaged directly to your inbox. So that's Academic Search Complete. We quickly explored what OneSearch and Academic Search Complete look like and how they function. I hope you feel a lot more comfortable using both of these resources because they're useful for any discipline. In a portion of the quiz that you should be completing, take a few minutes to explore both OneSearch and Academic Search Complete, searching for resources for an assignment that you are completing. For each of the resources, tell us what you like and what you do not like. As you may recall, earlier in this presentation, we discussed the strengths and some drawbacks of scholarly articles and books. While those are most likely what you'll be utilizing to complete your research assignments, there are some scenarios where you may need to utilize websites or content that you find via the World Wide Web. One great thing about websites is that they are easily accessible. As long as you have an internet connection, you can quickly find a ton of results. Websites can be especially useful if you're trying to find the most recent information on a subject, like a trending issue or current social movement. Because there are so many websites out there, you should keep in mind that a lot of content from the World Wide Web may contain biased or misleading information. You want to steer clear of that bad information. So it's really important to conduct a more thorough evaluation of websites to ensure that the information within it is accurate and reliable. One minor indicator of how reliable a website is its domain name. The domain gives you a clue as to the purpose of the site or the content itself. There are multiple types of traditional domain names, many of which you are likely familiar with. This is definitely not foolproof, but the more pueo you see next to a domain, the more credible it tends to be. Emphasis on tends. So let's start with .com, which indicates a commercial site. The information provided on these websites will likely highlight the positive attributes of whatever product the site is promoting. The next domain is .edu, which indicates an educational institution, whether that is a preschool, high school, or college. Generally, the information on these domains can be considered credible, but some assignments will allow students to create or post information to a portion of an educational website, so you'll need to discern between information created by students versus information created by the institution or a certain department or research center within that institution. The next domain is .gov. Use of this domain is restricted to official United States government entities, like cities throughout the nation, or departments like the Internal Revenue Service or the Census Bureau. The information on these domains is considered to be fairly credible. The next domain is .org. These generally indicate affiliation with nonprofit organizations like PBS or Red Cross. The information within these sites is typically unbiased and credible. But, and this is a big but, there are some nonprofit organizations that strongly advocate certain viewpoints over others. One example is the National Right to Life organization. So you'll need to use good judgment when evaluating and utilizing .org websites. The last domain is .net, which stands for network. This is a catch-all domain, so you'll need to carefully and thoroughly evaluate websites that utilize this domain. So overall, checking domain names is one way to quickly evaluate the general trustworthiness of a website. But as I've mentioned multiple times, it is not foolproof. In 2011, the International Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which is the organization responsible for accepting new domains, expanded the types of generic top-level domain name endings that people and entities can use. We now have hundreds of new endings, including but not limited to .tech, .online, .store, .blog, .dev, .design, .cloud, and .ai to contend with. Because of this, you really should approach websites that have non-traditional domain endings with a critical and skeptical eye. A more thorough way to evaluate websites and other content, which we'll explore in this next section, is to use an established evaluation system or workflow. While intended primarily for websites, you may also find these useful to help you assess the value of books and articles. I'll briefly introduce you to two such evaluation systems, the CRAP test and the SIFT method. The CRAP test helps you to judge the currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose of a website. Let's start with the first criteria, currency. When considering currency, you'll want to reflect on your topic in your instructor's guidelines and determine how current your sources need to be. Does the source you're looking at have a clearly identifiable posting or publish date? If so, is it current enough for you? Our second criteria is relevance. When considering relevance, you'll want to assess whether the resource is relevant to your research topic. One way of judging that is by the amount of usable quotes the source contains. Another way of judging that is by reflecting on the overall content. Is it too elementary, too advanced, or just right? The third criteria is authority. With authority, you'll want to examine who the author is. Does the source have the person's first and last name? Or is it associated with a real, legitimate organization? Or is there no real authority associated with the source? Once you've identified who the author is, the second thing you'll want to examine is why that author is qualified to write about the topic. Did they get a degree in the field? Are they currently working in the field? It's good to be judgmental when considering authority. The fourth criteria is accuracy. With accuracy, you'll want to judge whether there are citations or evidence supporting the claims in the website or the resource. Are those citations leading you to other credible sources? If so, that's great. If not, find a resource that backs up those claims with credible information. The second thing you'll want to explore is whether there are any blatant spelling or grammatical errors. If so, that indicates that the source is not scholarly and is probably something you should not be using for an assignment. The last criteria is purpose. When considering purpose, you'll want to assess what the purpose of the resource is. Is it to teach you something, to sell you a product, or to entertain you? You want objective information when conducting research, so aim for resources that provide you with facts and that try to teach or inform you about something. The SIFT method is a quick way to question a source and determine whether it's legitimate. You'll need to actively investigate it by opening new tabs and doing independent searches. The first step is to stop. It can be natural to want to click on a source and react to a headline, but don't. Just stop. You'll then want to investigate the source. Is it a familiar one to you, and do you trust its reliability? If not, go to the About page of the site to get a sense of its mission and purpose. Or you can check to see if there is a Wikipedia entry about the site, as it'll usually clearly indicate if the site is known to peddle conspiracy theories or spout hate rhetoric. The next step is to find trusted coverage. That means to look to see if other sites are reporting the same things. If so, is there a more trusted site that you can utilize instead? If you aren't finding coverage from other sites, that may be a clue that the claims are not factual. The last step is to trace claims, quotes, and media to the original source. You will essentially try to gain full context. Quotes, images, and videos may be edited to provoke a response from you. So do your due diligence and understand the full picture before fully responding. The CRAP test and SIFT method are two evaluation systems that you can utilize, but please be aware that there are a multitude of other similar evaluation systems that you can make use of. For more information about those systems, please visit the corresponding page on the Research and Writing LibGuide, briefly shown here. We've reached the final section of this episode. Let's wrap up by discussing good note-keeping strategies. Now, this was mentioned in the first episode of the series, but notes help keep you organized and on track. When you find a quality resource, download it and keep a citation of the source readily available. When reading the source, highlight key concepts that stood out to you, the main argument of the study, and any significant findings. You'll also want to annotate the paper by adding notes, comments, and questions about the resource. If you want to annotate but aren't sure what to comment on or think about, consider the following. If you have a research question, what answer does the resource provide you with? Is it supporting or negating your findings? Is there anything you agree or disagree with? Is there something about the study that you don't understand? And last but not least, if you find a great article, be sure to peruse through the sources that were cited in it. Following the breadcrumbs in this manner will lead you to similar studies that may also be relevant to your needs. So this is an example of what annotations might look like. You can see highlighted text and personal notes. If you're required to make an annotated bibliography, this is a great way to document your thoughts on your collection of research and to find common themes. Even if you aren't required to write an annotated bibliography, some students find it useful to go through the motions to gather their thoughts. With annotated bibliographies, you'll want to summarize the source, identify its strengths and weaknesses, and examine how it relates to your research assignment. From all of us on the Raw Skills team, mahalo for completing the second episode of the series. We hope you feel newly empowered to conquer research and that you learned new skills and strategies. In episode number 3, we'll tackle outlining and writing. We hope to see you there. Mahalo again, and take care.